I hope you're well. Welcome or welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is the Spare reading vlog part 2. So I did the thing, decided to read Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by him, and I decided to vlog it. And basically, if I put it in one vlog, it would have been a feature film, which seemed like a stupid thing to do. So I have divided the vlogs into two. I will link part 1 in the description box and somewhere over my head in the cards. But this is part 2, which focuses primarily on the relationship between the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Wow. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan. It talks about how they met, their courtship, their marriage, the problems they had within the institution and the royal family before they decided to step back, and kind of the fallout from that. So this is where things get really, really juicy. And I have lots of thoughts, and this is probably going to be another long reading vlog, so please make yourself comfortable, maybe grab a drink, a snack, you know, all that fun stuff. I know this is a divisive topic. I know that. I know not everyone's gonna agree with me. I know that too. But I'm just gonna say in the comment section, be nice to me, but also to the subjects of this book. They are real life people and a family dealing with a lot of hurt feelings and dysfunction in a very public forum. So there is that. Anywho, let us dive right into this reading vlog. Hello. It is Friday at like 5:30 in the evening. I'm done with work and I have just crossed the 50% mark with Spare. So I figured I'd talk to you guys while I'm fixing dinner, which is leftover chicken sausage and peppers and pasta. I'm very, very excited. It was what I requested my mother make me for my birthday dinner. So I'm gonna heat that up. But I've just reached 51% of this book. And this is the section where Prince Harry talks in great detail about his nether regions, which the whole time I'm listening to it, I'm just like, TMI. Like, I don't understand. Like, I understand you want to, like, sex sells. I understand that, like, you need some, like, juicy bits in this book, but I don't understand what the point of it was in the book. I don't understand why that had to be a thing. I did not have interest in learning those intimate details about Harry or William by proxy. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, this part of the book is like more familiar territory, I guess, because like he covers talking about Prince William and Catherine's wedding in 2011. He goes into kind of this lofty kind of explanation of how we all have like these different identities and we kind of cycle through life, which is interesting. It was an interesting take on it, but I kind of feel sad that he feels that because people marry, he's losing them. But it is funny to kind of hear him talking about the wedding, and then Prince Harry talks about some like ermine like thong that he shows at the reception, which you're kind of gutsy, Harry. Like that's a gutsy move considering who's in that room. But also I feel like it was a private reception, so probably no one who was in that room thought that that story would ever get out, because I'm pretty sure, not that I know who the guest list is, but I'm pretty sure that it was family and like super, super close friends
all people that they strongly believed would keep details like that out of the media. Yeah, and then I guess no one at the time thought a little over 10 years later Harry would include it in a memoir. But there was a lot to digest overall. He talks about like the Murdoch scandals and all the journalists and people who end up getting arrested for some of the crazy stuff they did, like wiretapping, I think, of celebrities and royals and things like that, and kind of celebrating the downfall of that, which was I was there for it because I think that stuff is so disgusting. I don't care if it sells paper. It no one's privacy should be invaded in that way. So I can understand why he's like, yes, stick it to Murdoch. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else. There was just so much, and I'm not talking in any order, I realize. Oh, I know. Harry today, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, were recently awarded something, was it by the NAACP? But it was an award for fighting against racism and bigotry, essentially. And so there were a few sections in here that kind of address that. And I do want to say that I appreciate some of the growth with Harry because of this. Like, he alludes to the Nazi uniform debacle, and he like makes a trip to Berlin, and he talks about how like it was a failure of a bunch of different things, including a failure of education in himself. And I think that awareness is really commendable. And he talks about too this instance where he called, I think it was someone in the military, a racial slur, but he didn't realize it was a racial slur at the time because he'd heard other people around him use it, and he kind of acknowledges his privilege in that moment. And then like the video clip gets out there and people start calling him racist, and he's like, I'm not a racist. I don't want to be a racist. Like, I don't want to be perceived as a racist because that's not what I intended. Like, he didn't mean it that way. He didn't realize, hadn't had the education. And so you see throughout the course of some of these like very small episodes where he is acknowledging that privilege, that white privilege in certain instances. And it is an educational, like, it's an education. Like, racism is taught, but unconscious bias, which he talks about a lot, it's something that is just informed by your environment a lot of the time. And I think most people can acknowledge that there are some biases that they don't think of as harmful, or that it never occurred to them was actually harmful. And so I I do like that he talks about it. He talks about needing the education. He talks about how badly he feels and how he wants to do better. Now he wants to be better. And I do think like that started young enough in him that it makes sense that he would be such an advocate today. That is commendable. I will give him that. And it does show growth in him. And people make mistakes, and as long as he learns from them, that's a good thing.
Hello! Greetings from my couch. I am about 66% of the way through Spare now. And I stopped because I've listened to a lot this morning. And we're just getting to the point where Harry meets Meghan. And I know this because I've watched the documentary and all of these things, so I know it's coming. The Snapchat filters of the dogs have been mentioned, and I was like, oh my god, pause. So a lot of what was in this last section was about his like military career and his tours and failed relationships, as well as him kind of trying to find I feel like purpose. Like he had purpose with the military, and then once he leaves the military, like what is his purpose now? And the creation of like the Invictus Games and like his efforts with like AIDS and conservation, especially when it comes to like endangered species in Africa. And it's a lot of really, really commendable stuff. I've listened to like 10, 11 hours of this book now. A lot of it is feeling a little bit repetitious, especially when it comes to talking about the media and like basically all the bad things that they do and that he's had to deal with and the people in his life have had to deal with. And then there are just like the moments where he says things about his family and I kind of just wonder what he thinks it will accomplish because it just does sound a little whingy. There are the like jabs at Prince William and Princess Catherine, Will and Kate, where he's like talking about his brother being like upset that like saying Africa is his thing, like that he shouldn't be doing it, or like William and Kate are busy setting up their home in Kensington Palace and they're like half a football field away and they don't invite him over. And like just those types of things, which it's kind of like they have a family, they have all of these responsibilities. Like, you could also, like, yes, they could invite you, but you could also invite them over. But I don't know, man. I don't feel like I'm gaining all that much from it. The good that the book can do in talking about post traumatic stress and anxiety and the evils of media and things, I feel like, and even dealing with grief, like over his mother, I feel like a lot of it is getting kind of lost in what feels like TMI moments, or the effects of magnesium, or doing shrooms, because that has come up. Name dropping of like Courtney Cox and Batman, Idris Elba, shopping at TK Maxx, which is the TJ Maxx equivalent in the UK, but talking about sales. And we all know TJ Maxx doesn't do sales like that. So there's like some weirdness in facts, as well as just like, I don't understand why some of this information is truly relevant, if that makes any sense. Good evening. It is a billion hours later. I feel like I've been staring at a computer screen all day, and that's because I have. I edited part 1 of this vlog, which will have gone live by the time you see this. But I did listen to more of Spare. I'm now 71% into the audiobook, and Megan has entered stage right, or whatever that expression is. And it's interesting because a lot of it is what we've heard before, especially if you saw the documentary on Netflix where like Harry saw her on a mutual friend's like Snapchat with the dog filter and he was like, who's that? And gets connected and go on this date that he turns up like a half an hour late to, and they kind of just hit it off and sparks fly. It is very much the way that the story is told, love at first sight on both of their parts. It's very romantic in the sort of way that you would expect in like a romance novel type of thing, where it's love at first sight. So if you don't like that trope, you're already got a point against you. And then like whirlwind romance, where I mean they really only like they go on a couple dates and then suddenly they're in Africa together for like a week. And what becomes apparent is that they really like things moved quickly, like it escalated quickly for them. like, it's almost too good to be true. Like, it really does feel very much like a romance novel with all of those, like, cliche tropes, but it like, this is the real thing for them. So, you're getting to the fairy tale part, which, as we all know, does not have a fairy tale ending with the wedding. Or at least the wedding is wonderful and then things happen. So, that's where I am right now. I would love to finish the audiobook tomorrow. I think I have 4.5 hours left, so I think I'll try to do that. But it's like the beginning of the end in a sense, because we know, or we've been told a lot of what happens next through their interviews and things. So we'll see. I'll let you know my thoughts per usual. Good morning. It is 6:50. I've been awake for a while and listening to Spare for a while, so I'm now 81% of the way through, and have basically just listened to the bulk of the courtship between Meghan and Harry. So where I had left off, I think last time I checked in, was their 4th date. And like I talked about it being a whirlwind. So now we kind of get to the parts where up until the 4th date or thereabouts, maybe a little bit after, they've been on the DL. Like, no one really knew about them, with the except of cousin Yuge, as Harry calls her, and Jack. But then he starts introducing her to members of his family. So they talk about that scene that has come up multiple times where he's going to take her to see Yuge's mother, Fergie, and the queen happens to be there, and they're like, no, you have to curtsy, and it's your majesty the first time, ma'am as in ham, every time after that. And supposedly her curtsy was low and flawless, and then he starts like introducing her to William and Kate and his father. And it's interesting because, like, he says that William and Catherine were super fans of Suits, so they were like kind of in disbelief that this was who Harry was dating. But at the same time, he feels that William, because she was an American and an actress, is kind of like, well, don't take it too seriously. He actually says that he had this way of saying, I think it was that she was an actress, as if it was the same thing as being like a criminal or a felon. So he's implying that there are prejudices there, and then all the media attention, it leaks, and it's kind of insane, the like attacks and the racist and misogynist like attacks that were against Meghan from the beginning. I remember the almost Straight Outta Compton thing as a headline, but he also talks about this like one article that talks about like if they have children, Meghan's exotic DNA doing something to the like blue blood Windsor and Spencer line, which is just like disgusting in general. And even the palace just being like, is the United Kingdom, England, ready for this type of thing? And I mean, it's disgusting. Like, she is hounded. And this is all stuff that we've seen and heard from Meghan, especially in the documentary. But I think kind of what stands out to me at this point is how the palace and everyone just says, like, don't read the papers, like, don't pay attention to it. Harry says that, like, his father and his brother got upset once he put out the statement because they felt it made them look bad for having not issued statements when, like, when the attacks were directed at their girlfriends. And, like, that surprises me. But also, we know kind of in general, the royal family's position is always never complain, never explain. So it doesn't surprise me all that much. Although I think the jealousy perhaps does. As does, I will say, Harry's shock that he has to ask permission from his grandmother before he asks for Meghan's hand, which is where I've kind of left off in the book right now. Because I'm kind of like, even I know that. Like, that was a whole plot point in The Crown with Margaret, and that's why she couldn't marry Peter Townsend. And so I'm kind of like, so we know this is a thing. I know this is a thing. How does he not know this is a thing? But I guess he didn't, or he didn't realize it was, like, actually law. I feel like at this point, the things that are being said about the media, it's stuff I've heard a million times because of their interviews and documentary and things like that. So it feels redundant at this point. But I would also say that I'm feeling that the book is a little long in the tooth at this point too. Like, it feels like it's dragging, which is never a good sign. And I don't know if that's because of the length of the book itself or just because so much of this has already been addressed in other formats. I'm 81% and I still have 3 hours to go. It's been a really, really, really long book. The one kind of section that feels new is him talking about Meghan telling him he needs to go to therapy after he spoke to her in a way that made her ask, like, did you hear men talking to women like that as a child? And she says, you need to go get help. And so he goes to therapy and starts trying to work through stuff, because all I'm thinking about is, okay, so Meghan told him to get therapy and he was able to get therapy. And I remember one of the things that came up in, like, the Oprah interview especially was that Meghan couldn't get help from a professional. And I'm kind of like, so how did Harry get help? Which I know is some of the criticism that they've experienced before. But it kind of makes me think, like, okay, so Harry managed to. And he talks about his mother having gotten therapy as well, although he doesn't think it worked for her. So why was there, like, a moratorium on therapy for Meghan later? Right now I feel like I would love for this book to end. It's and like I said, I don't know if that's just because it's really, really long or because so much of this has been hashed and rehashed in other formats. Like, I don't know. Hello, it's my leg. I am just past the now infamous altercation between Prince Harry and Prince William, where Prince William is shouting at him, pushes him. Harry falls on a dog bowl that breaks and cuts up his back. I feel like everyone knows this, because it was one of the things that leaked for the book. It's also something that has been talked about in great detail. It does feel very much like the climax to all of the tensions that have been described up until this point between William and Harry as brothers, but then also the Fab Four as the Cambridges versus the Sussexes. I do not abide violence, and I'm very disappointed in William having such a temper and being so violent. And the thing is, too, is that he then tries to goad Prince Harry into pushing him or hitting him, and Prince Harry won't. How Harry sees it is that there has always been tension between the two brothers, that there is this weird rivalry or competitiveness, where there's also this maybe jealousy, and this feeling from Prince William that because he is the heir and Prince Harry is the spare, that Prince Harry should defer to him, that he should always kind of be the subservient one. And the book has talked a lot about that, and it's interesting because Harry, in the aftermath of this, calls his therapist and says, you know, we have always fought, but this feels different. And I think that's interesting too. I think siblings fight. I know my sister and I have fought. I know the people you love can be the most cruel at times because they know what to say to get a rise out of you better than anyone else. But I think that it's really upsetting and disappointing. And I mean, from Harry's perspective, Prince William is being fed by the media this narrative that Meghan is difficult and that she's this and that she's that and all of these things, rather than being protective of his sister-in-law who is becoming a royal, who's moved countries, is the first biracial person in their family, and it's upsetting, you know? It really, really is. And so I don't know what more to really say about that. But it does seem as though, in addition to a lot of the kind of underhanded stuff that Prince Harry has been describing about the royal family and like the leaks that they put in the media about each other and things like that, it kind of shows just how dysfunctional this family is. But at the same time, like in the aftermath of this whole thing and the weird kind of, at least twice, I think Harry, Meghan, William, and Catherine all try to meet to kind of clear the air, and it just never seems to get anywhere. Tensions seem to be running high, and I think some of it is just cultural misunderstandings, American versus British, but I think some of it too is fed by everything that is going on in the media and this competitiveness. But in spite of all of that, like when Prince William gets upset and gets information that like King Charles has someone feeding negative stories to the media, and like he's getting upset about that, who does he call? He calls his brother. And who comes to his aid? His brother. Like they confront Prince Charles, now King Charles, about it. And so there is still this like brotherly bond there, but I also feel as though, yeah, the royal family should have done more. This whole never complain, never explain, this just ignore the media, but not like defending Meghan or Harry against this onslaught, which is very misogynistic or like racist. Like they're getting death threats and all of this, and like there's just not much being said or done by the royal family about it. It is disappointing because I feel like if there had been some sort of intervention, if like if the royal family had taken a harder line, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. Like to hear the depth of despair and to see at that point, even before they stepped down, how like how bad a rift was already there. It's heartbreaking because at the end of the day, it is like they are an institution, but they are also a family, even if they don't really act like it. Like it I don't even know. It's a lot to swallow. Like this part of the book that I've just read has a lot of the heavier stuff. And it's just really, 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 really unfair. I finished. I did it. I finished the book. Technically, I finished Spare yesterday. But I felt as though I needed like a few moments, a part of the day to really like process, because I feel like that last section of the book, which is really covering kind of the deterioration of the situation for Harry and Meghan within the royal family, the decision to step back, and kind of the fallout from all of that. It's a really heavy section. I feel like emotionally as well as just like factually. So I needed to sit for a little while and really try to get my head around a lot of it. At the end of the day, it is really heartbreaking to see just how alone and isolated Harry and Meghan seem to have felt during this time period, and to have the people that have like offered them support be people like Elton John and his husband and later Tyler Perry, and not necessarily his family. And even like later on, he has this moment where he talks about how William and he have this agreement that they can only swear on mommy's life, on Princess Diana's life, when like in these dire situations when they need to be believed. And William does it and tries to say like, I want you to be happy and to be supportive, and Prince Harry doesn't believe him. So you kind of see how badly things go. And I mean, one of my big criticisms of the royal family in these moments is just, I don't necessarily understand the silence from the royal family about certain things. And from what the book says, it does feel as though an unprecedented number of threats were made against Prince Harry and Meghan and Archie, like death threats. And all I could think was, why didn't Queen Elizabeth or Prince Charles at the time or Prince William release a statement about that, like condemning that sort of hateful speech and the threats? Like, I don't understand. Maybe all of them receive death threats on the regular, and so they just choose not to acknowledge them. But but that felt like a really like a situation where there was a failure to act on the case of the royal family.
a lot of it is just really heartbreaking, because I think you had to truly be at your breaking point to sacrifice everything the way they did, because you didn't feel safe, because you were so unhappy. And so seeing that, hearing Prince Harry talk about that from his own perspective, I think it gives some clarity, and also just shows kind of the depths to which the division between the family exists. It feels as though there was only one party within this that was really going to make compromises, because they talk about like the Sandringham summit, and there were like 5 options of what Harry and Meghan's involvement in the royal family could be, and only one statement is written up, one press release effectively, and it's for 5, which is what ended up happening. None of the others were written up, so it's like Harry in that moment realizes that like this whole thing was a farce. Like they're having this meeting to discuss the arrangement, and they'd all made the decision, and there was no way he was going to be able to change their minds. Or like him talking about like how things got leaked to the press about them wanting to live in the Commonwealth somewhere, and then he puts in writing to his father this mention of like if they need to give up their titles that they would, and that leaks to the press. And sorry, I'm not talking in any particular order, but it's just sad. It is really sad to see kind of a family devolve into such bickering and just inability to talk and to listen. Now it's time to talk about the book as a book, because I mean, my 2 vlogs have focused a lot on the subject and the content of the book, but I want to look at it as a nonfiction book itself. It is, I think, the fastest selling nonfiction book in like the UK as far as I can recall. It's everywhere in the media, but I want to look at it objectively, I guess, as a book, not considering which way I feel about the royals or Prince Harry and Meghan, none of that. So giving this book a star rating, I am kind of between 2.75 and 3 right now, for a few reasons. The first of which is to say, I think that if you are a royal watcher, if you're someone who is fascinated in the British royal family and interested in Prince Harry and Meghan, it's a book that you'll probably enjoy. For me, it was a very sort of easy read. Like I read it in a couple of days, and it's the sort of book that feels like cotton candy or sweets. You eat them, there's no nutritional value, but they're enjoyable and you want more of it. That's kind of how I felt. But I didn't think all that much about the writing itself by the ghost writer. And I also had a few issues with it overall. I think the first is that the book is too long, which is shocking to me that apparently the first draft of this was 800 pages long. At 400 pages, it feels like it's about 100, maybe 150 pages too long. And I think some of that is because, especially the second half of the book, is stuff that's already been touched on quite a bit, so it does feel repetitive. But also, as much as I enjoyed the little insights into the royal family and kind of these interesting snippets of information, I don't know if all of it was necessary. I don't know if all of the revelations, the kind of salacious details about his frostbitten pole, let's put it that way, or like some of these other episodes like that, like if they actually add to the narrative, I think they add wonderful sound bites for the PR for the book, because everyone wants to know more about this except me. That was a TMI moment and cringy, and please, I never want to hear about it again. But like, I can see that value to it, but I didn't see it adding to the overall narrative of the book, which seemed to be really more about Harry overcoming his grief, dealing with the media, and dealing with his family, if that makes sense. So I don't know, like some of those details just didn't fall into any of those buckets. And so I'm kind of like, I don't get why they're there. The other thing is that I find issue with a nonfiction book that has an unreliable narrator. And someone mentioned this in the comments on the first part of this vlog, and it was something that I actually had notes on as well. But like, Harry makes comments about lapses in his memory, or not fully remembering things, or maybe recollections vary, that famous expression, or like just a lot of these moments where he calls into question his own memory of facts or something that took place that he is now trying to describe. And if this is supposed to be from his perspective, if he's supposed to be the authority on his own life, how do you reconcile this unreliable sort of memory with everything else? Because it's not just once or twice it comes up throughout the book. It's pretty prevalent. So that bothered me a little bit, because I'm just like, so are we supposed to just take everything he says with a grain of salt? That's kind of the impression that it gave me. So that was also there. And then my last kind of issue with it is what I feel is a lack of accountability throughout the book on Harry's behalf. I think there are a couple moments where he takes accountability, like the fight he has with Meghan, where he ends up going into therapy afterwards because he realizes he shouldn't have spoken to her that way, that there was more to it than what just was on the surface. Or even when he talks about his regret over the Nazi uniform, or when he used a racial slur unknowingly or unwittingly. But even so, like the Nazi uniform, he then tries to defray some of the blame and say, well, William and Catherine laughed at it and they didn't tell me not to. I don't think he took enough accountability for his own actions. I don't think there was enough humility. I don't think that he showed enough of his own frailty as a human and his own error. And I kind of get it, because he's the hero in this book, and so it's everything else fighting against him. But I would have liked to have heard a little bit more from him about why, like how he thinks he contributed to this breakdown. A lot of it is, well, they're not listening to me, they're not hearing me. But like, give me a little bit more of this self-awareness and this like reflection on how you think you might have contributed, especially to the breakdown of the relationships in the family. Like, you talk about all the times that like William pushed you or made you feel bad as a kid, but like you had to have done some things to upset him too. We don't get any of those. Like, you were there through the whole Wadey Katie episode. Did you do anything to help her transition or any of that? Like, I just would have liked some more accountability on his part, because there are two sides to every story. We know the royal family is not going to give theirs, but at least don't try to blame them for everything, because in a relationship, like, you're in a relationship with your family, so there has to be some contribution from you too. Like I said, I'm between a 2.75 and a 3. I'm glad it's done. I'm glad I did not spend the $30-something to buy the book. I was able to borrow the book on Libby. But I think if you are only like casually interested in this book, like, you can get a lot of the information you want from all the coverage of the book. So I don't know that you necessarily need to read it. But that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, I really, really wish and hope that Prince Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet are able to kind of move beyond all of this and to lead happy lives in California or wherever life takes them. I hope that they're able to build a really happy life, a life that isn't built up on this kind of unfortunate situation with the royal family. I hope that we start to see less of this, we need to share our story and tell you how we were wronged, and more of their humanitarian work and their advocacy. And I think they have some strong opinions and feelings and are passionate about so many causes. I would really like to see them focusing more on those things and on the raising of their family. But if you've gotten through my 2 vlogs, thank you so much. Hopefully I made some good points and you enjoyed it. And if you did, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe, and help me get to 1,000 subscribers. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you in my next video, which will be returning to our usual programming. Bye.